The golden age of Pistar Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime stretched across an entire continent, its crystalline dome reflecting the light of 3 suns. Today marked the 500th anniversary of the Great Peace, and representatives from all 15 member species of the Stellar Coalition had gathered to celebrate their greatest achievement. The elimination of humanity from the galaxy. Ambassador Kethron of the Zephyrian Republic stood at the center of the vast hall, his scaled skin shimmering under the artificial aurora that danced across the dome. At over 300 years old, he was one of the few beings present who remembered the dark times when humans had spread their chaos across the stars like a plague. Fellow beings of the Coalition, Kethron began, his voice amplified by bioacoustic enhancers that carried his words to every corner of the hall. 5 centuries ago, our ancestors made the most difficult decision in galactic history. They chose to eliminate an entire species to preserve peace for all others. The assembly listened in respectful silence. Beings of every conceivable form filled the massive space. The ethereal luminari floated in their energy cocoons, while the massive Corvani pressed their rocky forms against specially reinforced sections of the floor. Insectoid Thresh clicked their mandibles in approval, and the gaseous nebulans swirled in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. The humans called themselves explorers, traders, and diplomats. Kethron continued, his reptilian features hardening with remembered anger. But everywhere they went, conflict followed. They were a species born for war, incapable of existing peacefully alongside others. Their very nature was antithetical to harmony. In the audience, younger beings who had only heard stories of humanity shifted uncomfortably. The tales seemed almost mythical now. Creatures who could survive in multiple environments, who reproduced rapidly, and who possessed an inexplicable drive to expand and conquer that no other known species shared. They established colonies on over 10,000 worlds. Kethron's voice grew darker. Each one became a military fortress. Their trade ships carried hidden weapons. Their diplomats were spies. Their scientists created weapons of unimaginable destruction. In less than 300 years, they controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy. The Corvani delegate, a mountain of sentient stone named Groktar, rumbled his agreement. His people had been among the first to face human expansion. They strip-mined our sacred mountains, he said, his voice like grinding boulders. They poisoned our crystal gardens with their industrial waste. When we protested, they brought warships. Similar murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Every species present had their own horror stories about human contact. The Thresh remembered how humans had burned their hive worlds. The Luminari spoke of humans who tried to harvest their energy essence. The Nebulans recalled how humans had attempted to mine their gas giant homes. But we were not defenseless. Kethron raised his clawed hand for silence. When the 15 species of our coalition finally united against the human threat, we discovered that their aggression was also their weakness. They fought each other as much as they fought us. Their governments were constantly at war with each other. Their colonies rebelled against their own homeworld. The great victory had taken nearly 50 years to achieve. The coalition had been forced to develop new technologies specifically designed to counter human adaptability. Biological weapons that targeted human DNA. Quantum bombs that could sterilize entire star systems. Nanite swarms that consumed human technology while leaving other species' equipment untouched. In the end, Kethron's voice grew solemn. We had no choice but to make the ultimate sacrifice. We destroyed every human world, every human ship, every trace of their existence. It was the only way to ensure lasting peace. The final battle had been fought at Sol, humanity's origin system. The Coalition fleet had surrounded their worlds and given them one last chance to surrender and accept exile to a distant galaxy. Instead, the humans had chosen to fight to the extinction. Not a single human had survived the cleansing fires that followed. And what have we achieved in these 500 years of peace? Kethron's tone shifted to pride and satisfaction. Look around you. 15 species living in perfect harmony. No wars, no conflicts, no territorial disputes. Trade flows freely between our worlds. Scientific knowledge is shared openly. Art and culture flourish without the shadow of violence. Was true, the galaxy had become a paradise of cooperation. The Corvani grew food on their mineral-rich worlds that they shared freely with species who lacked suitable planets. The Luminari provided clean energy to everyone without cost. The Thresh offered their advanced biotechnology for medical research that benefited all species. Resources were allocated by careful committee decisions rather than seized by force. Crime had virtually disappeared. The few disputes that arose were settled by meditation councils. Wars were a concept so foreign that most young beings didn't even understand what the word meant. The Coalition had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly peaceful civilization. But on the edge of known space, something was stirring that would shatter this perfect peace forever. Commander Vextar of the Coalition border. Patrol guided her sleek vessel through the Void Sector, the outermost region of charted space. A member of the aquatic Solarians, she could survive in both water and air, making her ideal for long-range patrols in the empty regions between star systems. Her ship, the Harmony's Edge, was equipped with the most advanced sensors in the Coalition fleet. For 3 months, she had been detecting strange anomalies in this sector. Energy signatures that appeared for brief moments before vanishing. Gravitational disturbances that suggested the presence of massive objects that her sensors couldn't locate. Most disturbing of all, there were traces of exotic matter that didn't match any known technology. Commander, her science officer, a crystalline being named Shardik, called from his station. I'm detecting another energy surge from coordinates 847 Alpha Delta Vextar. Gills fluttered with interest. Those coordinates marked the location of an old human world that had been sterilized during the Great Cleansing. Set course immediately. I want to investigate this personally. The dead world of Kepler 438b hung in space like a brown marble. Once, it had been home to nearly 1 billion humans who used it as an agricultural center. Now it was a barren rock, its atmosphere poisoned. By Coalition bioweapons, its surface scoured clean by orbital bombardment. Nothing should have survived there for 500 years. But as Harmony's Edge entered orbit, Vextor S sensors detected something impossible. There were structures on the surface that hadn't been there in previous scans. Not ruins or remnants, but new constructions built from materials that gave off the same exotic energy signatures she had been tracking. This is impossible, Shardik said, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. The sterilization protocols were absolute. Nothing could have survived on this world. Vextar activated her ship's most sensitive scanners and focused them. On the larger structure, what she saw made her heart skip a beat. The building was clearly of human design, but it incorporated technology far beyond anything humans had possessed 500 years ago. Energy flowed through its walls in patterns that hurt to look at, and most disturbing of all, there were life signs inside. Signal Coalition Command immediately, Vexter ordered. Tell them we have a code Omega situation. Before her communications officer could comply, every screen on the ship's bridge flickered and went dark. Then, slowly, an image appeared. A human face, but not quite human. The features were too perfect, the eyes too bright, the skin too pale. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Greetings, Commander Vextar of the Coalition Border Patrol," the figure said with a smile that held no warmth. "My name is Marcus Chen, though I am no longer entirely what you would consider human. I represent the evolved human collective, and we have been watching your peaceful little civilization with great interest." Vexter's crew scrambled to regain control of their systems, but the human's image remained on every screen. "You are extinct," she managed to say. "We saw your worlds burn. We counted your dead." "You saw what we wanted you to see," Marcus replied. "Did you really think a species that had spread across 10,000 worlds would keep all their eggs in one basket, while you were busy sterilizing our official colonies? Our real population was already safely hidden in the void between galaxies." The truth hit Vexter like a physical blow. "You let us think we had one. We let you believe you had achieved your perfect peace," Marcus nodded. "And we used those 500 years very wisely. While you stagnated in your harmony, we evolved. We enhanced ourselves with biotechnology your species cannot imagine. We developed weapons that make your coalition fleet look like toys. And most importantly, we learned patience." Around the human's image, other screens began displaying star charts. Vextar recognized the patterns immediately. Every major coalition world, every defense installation, every trade route. The humans had been watching and mapping everything. "But why reveal yourselves now?" Vexter asked, though she dreaded the answer. Marcus's smile grew wider, and for a moment his human facade slipped, revealing something far more alien underneath. "Because, Commander, our patience has finally run out. It's time to reclaim what was ours." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Then, one by one, Vextar's long-range sensors began detecting massive objects emerging from the void beyond the galactic rim. Ships unlike anything in the Coalition database, larger than cities and radiating power signatures that dwarfed entire star systems. Humanity had returned, and they were not the same species that had been driven from the galaxy 500 years ago. The return of humanity. The emergency session of the Stellar Coalition Council was unlike anything in 5 centuries of recorded history. Representatives from all 15 member species materialized via quantum transmission in the Grand Assembly Hall, their faces bearing expressions of shock and terror that had not been seen since the days of the Great Cleansing. Ambassador Kit stood at the center of the hall, but the confident leader who had spoken of peace just days before was gone, replaced by a frightened old reptile whose scales had dulled with stress. "Fellow council members," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "we face the impossible. Humanity has returned." The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and denials in dozens of languages. The massive Corvani delegate Grokta slammed his rocky fists against the floor, creating tremors that shook the entire building. "Impossible," he roared. "We watched their star burn. We counted their corpses. I have seen the recordings from Commander Vextar's encounter." Catherine continued, raising his voice above the din. "The evidence is undeniable. Not only did humans survive our cleansing, but they have spent 500 years preparing for this moment. On the massive display screens surrounding the hall, images appeared that chilled the blood of every being present, vast ships emerging from the darkness between galaxies, their hulls gleaming with an inner light that seemed to bend space around them. The vessels were enormous, each one the size of a small moon, and the sensor readings showed they possessed power cores that rivaled small stars. Dr. Ylanth, the Coalition's leading xenobiologist and member of the gaseous nebulan species, swirled. In agitation, the being in the transmission called himself Marcus Chen, but our analysis shows he is no longer entirely human. The genetic markers we detected suggest massive biological enhancement, possibly cybernetic integration, and cellular structures we don't recognize. How many ships? Asked Admiral Vekfar of the Solarian Navy, her gills fluttering with barely controlled panic. The answer came from the latest intelligence reports. Over 10,000 vessels detected so far, reported the Coalition's chief intelligence officer. But our sensors suggest there may be many more still hidden in dark space. The numbers were staggering. Even at the height of their expansion, humans had never possessed a fleet of this size. Somehow, in the void between galaxies, they had not only survived, but thrived and grown beyond their original numbers. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Ascendant Dawn, flagship of the human fleet, and watched the Coalition worlds through sensors that could perceive reality in ways that aliens couldn't imagine. She was Marcus Chen's great-great-granddaughter, though the concepts of family and generation had changed dramatically during humanity's exile. Like all modern humans, Sarah had been enhanced far beyond the capabilities of her ancestors. Her skeleton was reinforced with materials that didn't exist in normal space. Her nervous system had been upgraded with quantum processors that allowed her to think at superhuman speeds. Her cells had been modified to repair themselves indefinitely, making her functionally immortal. But it was her mind that represented the greatest change. Through neural linking technology, she was simultaneously connected to every human in the fleet, sharing thoughts and experiences in a collective consciousness that maintained individual identity while enabling perfect coordination. Status report. Sarah commanded, her voice reaching every ship in the fleet through quantum entanglement communications. All vessels are in position, reported her tactical officer, David Kim, whose own enhancements allowed him to process the movements of 10,000 ships simultaneously. Coalition forces are mobilizing, but their response is chaotic and uncoordinated. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. The Coalition species had grown soft during their centuries of peace. They had maintained defense fleets more as symbols than as actual military forces. Their weapons were outdated, their tactics forgotten, their soldiers untested in real combat. Open a channel to all Coalition worlds, Sarah ordered. It's time to make our intentions clear. Across the galaxy, on every inhabited planet, every space station, every ship, human faces appeared on communication screens. But like Marcus Chen, these were not the humans the Coalition remembered. These beings radiated an aura of power and purpose that made the viewer's instincts scream warnings about apex predators. People of the Stellar Coalition, Sarah began, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate in the bones of every listener. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Evolved Human Collective. 500 years ago, you committed genocide against our species, believing you had achieved peace through our extinction. On the Coalition worlds, billions of beings watched in terror as the truth of their history was laid bare. The older generations remembered the propaganda that had justified the Great Cleansing. But seeing these enhanced humans, they began to understand that their ancestors might have made a terrible mistake. "You were not wrong to fear us," Sarah continued. "Humanity was indeed a warlike species, driven by instincts that made coexistence difficult. But instead of seeking understanding or compromise, you chose annihilation. That choice has consequences." The display screens showed detailed scans of coalition defenses. Every weapon, every shield, every fortification was mapped and analyzed. The message was clear: the coalition had no secrets from the returning humans. "We do not come seeking indiscriminate revenge." Sarah's voice carried a coldness that made solar winds feel warm. "We come to reclaim what was ours and to establish a new order in this galaxy. Every world that once belonged to humanity will be returned to us. Every species that participated in our attempted extermination will pay reparations for 5 centuries of theft." Ambassador Kezran, watching from the Emergency Council session, felt his old heart struggling to beat. "They want their worlds back," he whispered. "But those worlds have been inhabited by our people for 500 years. Trillions of beings. Call those places home. Then they will need to find new homes," Sarah replied, somehow hearing his whispered comment across impossible distances. The enhanced humans' sensory capabilities had grown beyond anything the coalition could comprehend. "However," Sarah continued, "we are not the same species you drove into exile. We have evolved beyond the limitations that made us a threat to galactic peace. We offer you a choice: accept our terms and join us in building a new civilization that combines our strength with your harmony, or face the consequences of continued resistance." To demonstrate their capabilities, Sarah gave a subtle hand signal. Across the galaxy, human ships fired single warning shots at coalition military installations. The beams that lanced out from the human vessels didn't just destroy their targets, they unmade them at the molecular level, leaving perfect spherical voids where fortresses and weapons platforms had once existed. The message was unmistakable. The coalition's defenses were useless against human technology. But the true shock came when the humans revealed what they had learned during their centuries in exile. The dark space between galaxies was not empty, as the coalition had believed. It was home to phenomena and entities that existed beyond normal understanding. The humans had not merely survived in that realm, they had learned from it, incorporated its mysteries into their being. "We have transcended the limitations of our original nature," Sarah explained as images showed human colonies in impossible environments. Cities that existed in folded space, beings who could manipulate reality through will alone. "We no longer need to conquer to survive. We no longer fight over resources because we can create matter from quantum foam. We no longer age or die from disease or violence." Dr. Yeland H., studying the biological readings from the human fleet, gasped as the implications became clear. "They're not showing aggression," she announced to the stunned Coalition Council. "These readings, they're showing restraint. They could have destroyed every coalition world in minutes, but they're holding back." The realization sent a new kind of terror through the assembly. The humans weren't threatening them with their full power, they were demonstrating their mercy. "You have 7 days to consider our offer," Sarah's image said from the screens. "Evacuate the human worlds voluntarily, and we will assist in relocating your populations to suitable new homes. Refuse, and we will take them by force. Choose cooperation, and we will share the knowledge we gained in the void. Advancing your species beyond your current limitations. Choose resistance, ... double quotes. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The empty spaces where coalition fortresses had once existed spoke louder than any threat. As the transmission ended, The coalition faced an impossible decision. They could surrender and accept humanity's terms, abandoning worlds they had called home for 5 centuries. They could fight and face certain annihilation against beings who had evolved beyond their understanding. Or they could hope that somewhere in their peaceful civilization, they could find the strength to negotiate with gods who had once been their victims. The age of coalition peace was over. The age of human ascendancy had begun, and across the galaxy, both species prepared for a confrontation that would determine the future of all sentient life among the stars.